Welcome to Small Town Snarks. I'm Joel.
And I'm Miranda. Let's get snarky.
Hey!
Hey!
Hey! Happy snarking.
Happy snarking.
How
Welcome
we doing?
back.
Welcome back.
We're good.
Grease is
good.
Grease
It's
is
the word.
still the word.
It is still the word. We're still talking about it.
We still are talking about it.
It's happening.
But I heard a rumor. Did you hear this rumor?
Oh, what was the rumor?
We have a fan question.
Fan question.
Fan question. Do you want to share what the fan question is?
Yes. I know I act surprised, but I know what the fan question is.
Oh, okay. Well, care to share?
Yes, I would love to. This is coming from Miss Jordan over in Carroll County, Maryland.
Oh, Jordan from Carroll County, Maryland.
Yeah,
okay.
Jordan. Hey, Jordan.
Hey, Jordan.
It's Miranda and your good friend Joel.
Yes.
So Jordan wants to know how we determine what shows we do and when we do them and what venues we do them in, which I think is a great question.
It is a great question. It is a very loaded question.
It is.
There's a lot to unpack there.
It
but
is.
we, fortunately, Jordan came to the right place because we have the answers to all of those questions.
We do.
We do.
So sometimes the show choices are just passion projects that Joel and I want to do.
Yeah.
That's the truth of it. Other times, there are shows that we think are going to bring in a lot of people. And sometimes when we're looking at a full season, well, I guess this is every time we look at a full season, we try to balance it. So we try not to be too musical heavy. We want to put plays in there. We pick the plays and musicals we do often based on the directors we have in mind and what they're interested in. So we always want someone working on a show that they care about. You have anything to add up to that before I talk about venues?
So I think the other big piece to that is, I think all of that is 100% accurate. But the other piece of it is we're very conscious about what other companies are doing. And we have,
that's true.
We, for the most part, have really good relationships with other community theaters and the high schools in the area and the colleges in the area. We know what shows are being performed, and we try not to say, okay, great, this company's doing such and such. We're also going to do it, but we're going to do it a week later.
Yeah.
And we're going to oversaturate the market with the same show. And that's just going to be how it's going to be. So we take that into consideration with the shows too. But I think, you hit the nail on the head with the fact that a lot of it is passion project based. People say that they want to direct shows, and we find ways that we can incorporate those into a season. Or, it's a balancing act. It's a very delicate balancing act.
Like, I can use two shows, I can use a few shows from our current season as examples. So Pippin, there was going to be a different show in its place, but the reason... I know. Next time.
Show.
But the reason we chose Pippin is because Joel loves that show.
I do. I adore that show. Big passion project.
Yeah. So that's why we chose Pippin. And then Into the Woods is dedicated to our friend Jacob, so that's why we chose that one. Rock of Ages is a great example of very intentional choice based on what the community is doing. So there's another company that's doing more of like a dramatic show that includes children, and then there's another company that they wouldn't mind a shout out, but they're doing Hunchback.
Yeah.
So both very dark musicals. And I had wanted to do Rock of Ages for a long time, and it was intentional because I was like, okay, these people are doing dark shows. Let's do something fluffy.
Exactly.
And that way the community has the opportunity to experience both. So they can go see something dark and they can see something fun. But yeah, great question. In terms of venues, to kind of answer that side of things, a lot of it is just availability. That's a lot of it. So the theaters in the area that we use, in particular the community college and also the art center, they're booked a lot. But the other honest answer to that is they're expensive. So a lot of times the shows that we put there are very intentional. We feel like we can sell enough tickets to those shows to make up the cost of the venue.
Yes.
When we use a black box, that's also very intentional. It's lower cost, and we put our smaller scale shows there so they can turn a profit, so then we can put that money back into a bigger show, usually. And in particular with the community college, we can actually only book them over the summer. Mm-hmm. They're not an option any other time throughout the year. So very great questions. I'm glad you asked that question because I think a lot of people are curious about it and haven't had the opportunity to talk to us about it. But it's a lot of business logistics, really. Some of it is just fun, like I want to do this show and I want to book this venue, but a lot of it is logistical work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like what you said about the selection of spaces because it really does come down to, in addition to availability, but like, we can't just put any show into the Arts Center or, we can't just put any show into the community college. It's all about what you expect to do business-wise, what the demand is, what the interest is in that particular production, and what the scale of the show itself is. I mean, you can't necessarily, you can probably put a show that you're doing in a black box on a main stage, but, like the community college, but you can't necessarily put the size of a show that you're putting a community college into a black box.
Yeah,
so it's just very delicate in that sense, too.
100%. And to make sure this is clear as well, all of these venues are extremely supportive of our group. Mm-hmm. It's just the nature of some of these venues, they have to charge a minimum fee to protect their business. So just how they make strategic decisions about what they're charging to make sure their business is able to operate, we have to make strategic decisions about what shows we put where to make sure our business is able to continue operating. Exactly. So it's very similar circumstances. I adore the Art Center as a venue. I know from like an acting perspective, it might not be everyone's favorite because the backstage is so small, but that venue, every time I walk in, it's like I'm coming home every single time. So yeah, very, very interesting stuff. And then one day we're going to have our own space and we'll be able to, give back to these venues that have supported us for so long. But until then, we're doing the venue dance and we love it and we've learned it and we are able to do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jordan, for that question. But also, we'll just use that as a great spinoff into our conversation. The Art Center is home.
The Art Center is home.
And I believe where we left off in our last conversation, we're ready to head home for the first time. We're ready to head home.
We are heading home. It's the first time we've done the venue dance.
Yes.
And
we're gonna.
Oh boy.
We I mean, just to kind of set the groundwork there. We were home there for our first two shows. We were there for our first two shows.
3 actually.
Oh, was it the first? Oh, it was the first 3. Yeah, I was skipping one really important one. But yes, yeah. No, we were there for the first 3 shows. And
there's something magical about like pulling up to that venue and seeing your show on the marquee.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's like the show's happening. Tech Week has begun. And you feel, at least for me, seeing Grease up there, I felt so professional. I was like, oh my gosh, like my show is up on this marquee. That's on the list. When we get our own space, we need a marquee.
A big marquee.
It is the most magical thing. But
I love one of the things that I know we used to do every time, or we still do it honestly when we have shows there, is there's always we take a moment to get a picture under the marquee with our show name. And it's so magical to be in that space and to have that,
And it's great marketing. And that's another reason that I just love this venue is we've gotten people, every time we do a show there are people that just walk in because they see the show on the marquee and they start asking questions about it. It's in the heart of downtown Westminster and it's really a gem there. It is, we're so lucky to have that theater just wedged in there.
Absolutely.
But circling back to Grease.
Yes.
I had only scheduled 2 days in the venue. The reason I did this is it was over $200 an hour. I don't remember what the exact price was at the time, but we weren't a nonprofit, so it was really expensive. And I was like, you know what? I can't afford to be in here longer than I need to be.
Yes.
So 2 days is going to be enough. We'll do 2 run-throughs. We'll be fine. We'll make sure we have all the run-throughs done before that, and we're just going to do the lights. And we were using tracks. We weren't miking anyone. I was like, we'll be fine.
Oh, you didn't mic anybody for
No.
Grease?
We'll get to that as well.
Oh, okay.
Here's where my big fault was with this particular show.
Okay.
I vastly overestimated the amount of space we would have. So, and from our high school experience, when you listen to those episodes, you can understand why I thought you had to have a big set. I was like, it's crucial.
Yeah.
You have to have a big set because every show we had in high school had a big set. That's what I was familiar with. So I thought if they were in a bedroom, they didn't need a bed. They also needed walls and a door. Looking back on that, that is completely unnecessary, and we don't add pieces just to add them now.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But back then, it felt like that's what we need to sell this illusion that they're in this
space.
Room.
Yeah.
We need walls. So we had walls, we had doors, we had bleachers, we had a bed, we had a car, we had a picnic table. We had a lot. We had 2 U-Hauls full of stuff pulling up to the art center. Mm-hmm. And I think my grandpa was driving one. My mom was driving the other. Mm-hmm. But yes, 2 U-Hauls full of things. And there was no backstage plan. I thought, we'll get it back there and we'll figure it out. And Jane, my assistant director, she was going to be stationed back there. Mm-hmm. Now, for some context, when Jane and I worked on High School Musical together in high school, the kids weren't getting the scene transitions. So we put ourselves backstage and we nailed it. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, not to sound cocky about my high school self, but like, we nailed the scene transitions. Mm-hmm. We got it. We knew what we were doing. We were locked in and it worked. So I thought, having Jane backstage for Grease, she'll take care of it. Mm-hmm. She'll figure out what needs to be done. And I'm going to focus on like the lights and stuff.
Sure.
So we had gotten, for the first big scene thing was for Summer Nights. So we had the picnic table and the bleachers out on stage. Mm-hmm. And there was this great moment where they were on the picnic table and the bleachers and the psych was lit up. And, I'll let Eric fully tell his story, but that's when he kind of was like, oh, we might have a show, was when he saw them like on stage in that situation. Uh-huh. We tried to start running the show and it's a disaster. People are getting stuck, like wedged in between set pieces. Mm-hmm. Set pieces can't get on. They can't get off. Some of them won't fit through one of the doors, but they'll fit through the other set of doors. Mm-hmm. It was just a nightmare. Mm-hmm. And this was another one of my moments where I went up to the light booth. Jacob and Dakota were up there, had a little breakdown. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I wasn't prepared for this. And then they kind of both just looked at me and then went back to their lights. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm on my own here. And I collected myself, went back down, and I was like, all right, we got to just figure this out. Yeah. At this point, after we had loaded everything in, we were kind of almost done our first day of tech already, after we had tried and failed to do a run-through, basically.
Yeah.
I talked to the venue. They were like, you can have like 5 extra hours of time tomorrow. And I was like, great. Now, they did charge me for it. I'm not, it wasn't just a gift, but they were like, you can purchase these extra hours. Okay, great. I remember sitting my cast down and I was like, look, you guys know this show. We've run it 100 times. Mm. We are going to spend the rest of today just figuring out scene transitions. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to spend 4 hours tomorrow before the run-through figuring out scene transitions. Mm-hmm. And then we are going to do one full run-through.
Yes.
And I was like, you don't need to panic because you know the show. So I'm not worried about the show. I'm worried about the stuff we haven't been able to run.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like, this is what I mean when I say the amount of trust this cast had in each other and me, because they all just kind of looked at me like, yeah, let's do it. Mm-hmm. And like when you're in these situations where it's not ideal and you just need everyone to be on the same page so you can get through it, it's crucial that everyone listens to you and goes with your plan, even if they're not happy with the plan.
Absolutely.
And that was one of those moments where everyone listened and everyone went with the plan. And I was like, great.
That's all you can
we
ask
got
for.
it.
Yep.
So Jane and I like completely brainstormed and figured out what needed to go where. And honestly, that was mostly her like brainstorming, figuring out, okay, this set piece needs to go through this door, and this set piece needs to go through that door. And then once this is used in this scene, it's not used again. So we're going to put it on the back deck, and we're going to clear out the backstage area. Like, it was, the set pieces were basically choreographed. Everything was choreographed backstage.
Yes.
And not only that, but all the walls, gone. We're cutting them. They're dead to us. We can't do them anymore. We actually said that we didn't have anywhere to put them. We put them behind the psych. They just sat there the whole show.
Yeah.
The doors were falling apart, but I still wanted a door. I don't use doors anymore. 18-year-old Miranda really was going to die on that hill that she needed a door. Don't know why.
Big fan of doors.
I needed a door. So we cut 2 of the doors, but I had 1. So kept 1 door. And we really just like ran it, figured out how to fit everything in the space, and it was crazy, but it happened. So we're doing that final like run through, and there was only one moment, and it was during Grease Lightning, where the guy playing Kaneki, because he was so far upstage on the car, you just couldn't hear him. And it didn't matter how much you turned down the track, you just could not hear him. So the Arts Center actually let me borrow a mic to mic him for that number.
Oh, okay.
It was the only thing we mic'd anyone for. We didn't have the budget for mics. Like, it just wasn't going to happen. I didn't know at the time that you could rent them. But yeah, I was like, well, we're doing canned music. We'll just turn down the music when we need to.
Sure.
And that's basically what we did. We used the Art Center software to play our tracks, and it worked pretty well. What was weird is this one song, every time we would play it, it would, like, skip, and then it would keep going. And it wasn't a CD or anything. And they kept assuring me that everything was fine. And I was like, why is it skipping? Oh, no, it'll be fine. It did that during the shows, too. And here's the crazy thing. The song that was skipping, there were a trio of girls singing it, and every single time they would all stop at the same time and start back up at the same time. And I didn't tell them to do that. They just knew. They were thinking actors, which sounds rude, but what I mean by that is they were thinking about the needs of the show while they were actively acting in it. And that is a skill. And not everyone has it because it is difficult. But they clearly were thinking actors, and they knew, okay, we have to time this so we stop at the same time, and we have to time it so we start at the same time to recover from this skip. So very impressive work by them. I don't know what was happening with the track, but they nailed it. And then we were off to the races, and like the show was happening. So
I just cannot imagine. I mean, we have had with this company, I've probably done over 20 shows by this point. I don't even know if that number's accurate, but it feels like it's probably in the ballpark. Tech Week is always one of those things that you can never adequately prepare for because there's always going to be something.
Always.
And even, it's never the same thing between 2 shows, so it's not like something you can, troubleshoot ahead of time necessarily. I think we've gotten to the point where we're now better at it, but the obstacles that come with Tech Week always happen. They always do.
And I think as someone who has anxiety, I believe that doing theater has actually helped me significantly manage my anxiety because of what you just said. You get to a point where you realize, oh, there are things that are going to happen that I can't predict. It doesn't matter how much I think about them. I can't predict them. And I'm going to have to be willing to go with the flow, even if that makes me uncomfortable.
Yes.
So the idea of having a plan, but knowing that it's not likely to go that way. Right? They say, like, when you have a baby, you should have a birth plan, but part of your birth plan should be, the whole thing can go out the window, and I just got to be ready for it.
Sure.
And that's tech. Like, you have a plan, and if you plan, usually you have better outcomes, but it will never be exactly what you planned for it to be. Right.
Well, and one of the things you mentioned in the last episode was this conversation about how this cast that you were working with was so, like, they were in the trenches with you, they were working with you, and they were understanding of that, and I don't want to say that that's not something that's been consistent because we've worked with some really incredible casts over the years, but if I give any advice or say anything in particular to people, and especially performers, especially at this level in particular, Tech Week is a stressful time for everybody. There's always something going on. Everyone wants a perfect show at the end of the day. And, the position that we're in, we don't necessarily get the luxury of being able to focus in on just one particular aspect of Tech Week. We have to be so responsible for the entire vision of the show and maintain the cool, and also remind people that the show's going to happen and it's going to be a good show. And I think that's the thing that I always remind myself with Tech Week. And, I didn't go through that process with you on Grease, but in recent years and, even from the beginning, we're all going to put on this show together. You have to trust in the process and know that by the time you get ready to open the show, it's going to be a beautiful show, because that's the goal that we set for ourselves.
Yeah, and even just today, we were talking about a school in the area who they have a 12-hour tech rehearsal, and that's just one of their 5 or 6 tech rehearsals that they have. When you are renting venues, first of all, 9 times out of 10, you can't afford to do that. Correct. Even if you technically have the money to do it, most of our shows have to break even or get a little bit of money for us to continue operating. Yes. So we can't spend an egregious amount of money just on venue fees. We would love to have a full tech day. It doesn't normally happen. Also, this idea of doing your best to respect your performers' times, and we work with a lot of people who have very busy schedules, and they would not be able to carve out an entire day. So, I see these other companies, I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I could do that, but that's just not the situation we're in. And I do think it's very impressive what we're able to pull off with the number of hours and days we have.
Absolutely.
Greece obviously was a little bit crazier because I would never dedicate just 2 days to tech. I do it with the junior shows, but they're half length, I would never do that for a main stage show. But it's still happened. And I think too, a motivating factor was we all kind of felt like the underdogs. And it was never really a competition, but I think in particular, with FTP, I'd just seen Bye Bye Birdie, and it was a great show. It was really solid, and it should have been. They've been around for a long time. But I remember my mom actually met one of the board members, and he hasn't been on the board for a long time, but she ran into him, and she started talking about Grease, and he just had a lot of questions, and he was just kind of like, oh, why is she starting her own company, though? We have enough theater here. Why isn't she just coming and doing shows with us? So there was definitely a mentality in the community of, who are these people? Why are they trying to do this? And what is the end product going to be?
Yeah.
I think that's where we got a lot of our ticket sales from, is people genuinely being very curious as to how this was going to go. Because in all honesty, I did not do nearly enough marketing for this show because I didn't know how to do it. I'd never done it before, and I was so focused on all the other aspects. We sprinkled in some marketing, but the return on that little amount of marketing was crazy. I mean, we basically packed the Arts Center. It was a lot of people being very curious about how this thing was going to go.
Absolutely.
And I have some thoughts on the performance too, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to, if you have any other questions or thoughts on that crazy Tech Days situation.
I don't think I have any other questions. I just am, in hindsight, just baffled by, I remember seeing Grease, and we can get into that as we talk about the production itself, but thinking about that and seeing what you all were able to accomplish with the deck of cards that you had for Grease, it's just insane. It's insane. And to think, I don't even think I knew that it was just 2 days until very recently when we had this conversation.
Yeah.
To do all of that, I can't even think of any of the shows that we've done in recent times where I'm I could have done it all in 2 days. Sure. I mean, that first day is exactly what you described it as. It's, for lack of a better word, chaos. It's trying to make sure, your vision never looks the same way as you imagine it.
Yep.
Even after performing in the Arts Center the many times that we have up to this point, it never works out exactly the way that you envisioned it to be.
Yeah.
So then you have to troubleshoot, and you spend time troubleshooting, and then you have to spike everything, and then you have to do the lights, and then you have to do the sound, and you have to do, there's so many pieces to it that like the idea of only doing it those 2 times, it's just unbelievable.
Well, and you know this too from directing shows, but the number of questions you get, especially on that first day of tech, I wish I could adequately describe how overwhelming that is via podcast. It's very, very overwhelming. There's a lot of, hey, Miranda, I can't find my costume. I can't find my prop. Hey, my mom's coming to bring me my water at 6. Is that okay? Just random things that you're like, I'm trying to do 10 million things. Could you look for your costume?
Right.
But it's a lot because you're the person.
You are the person.
You are the person.
And I think from that standpoint, also just for everybody that's listening, just know that you have questions. We also have questions. And like, it's not in any way, shape, or form that your question is not important. But if we don't get our questions answered,
our questions are show breakers or makers. Your question is not.
That, like, right. It's like, yes, you need your costume, but you won't need your costume at all if we don't have the set moved into the space. Or you won't need your costume at all if you can't be seen because the lights aren't in place. Like, we want to help you, but we also have to get ourselves in order to get to that point. And sometimes I feel like people are, you know, I can sense that overwhelming feeling of like, okay, this is very stressful. There's a lot happening. I don't know what to do. I'm very overwhelmed. And it's like, we're all in the same boat. But most people have been through this process before. Yeah. They know what to expect, and it's always that way. And by the time, I mean, it's different with 2 days, but, you know, if we move in on a Monday, by Friday night, when you get ready to open your show, it's going to be ready to open.
Yeah, and I have to remind myself often that actors have different priorities in Tech Week than directors do. So, like, our priorities are making sure all the different facets of the production come together.
Yes.
Their priorities are making sure they have their costume, making sure their props are set, making sure they know their choreography. Like, it's just a totally different world. So when they come up to me and they're asking about their costume, to them, that's the most important thing in that moment. And I have to remind myself of that. I'm like, okay, just because it seems silly to you in this moment because you're thinking of 20 other things, doesn't mean that it isn't justified that they're worried about this thing right now.
Exactly.
So I have to remind myself of that. But it's funny, too, because we've, you know, in later years we'll talk about this, but we've added, like, each show has an actor's advocate. Basically, it just gives the actors someone in the cast that they can go to if they ever need to have a conversation that they're not necessarily super comfortable going to leadership directly about. And I know we've joked before, like, we need a director's advocate because sometimes when you're in those trenches and you've got 30 cast members asking you about things that you can't prioritize, it just is the most overwhelming thing. And you have to regulate yourself in a way that's like, all right, I have to put this in the back of my brain and I'm going to have to follow up on it. Otherwise, they're going to ask me again. So I have to put it in the back of my brain and focus on 10 other things. And then I'm going to have to come back to that thing.
So true.
It's a unique skill that
it is.
We've both gotten better at it, I will say, but it's ever evolving and is always challenging. No matter how good we've gotten at it, it's always challenging to navigate.
Sometimes I have this mindset of, and I'm pretty confident I know you feel this way too, but I sometimes wish that I could be that director that everyone imagines or dreams that I am, and like the sense of I wish that I had every answer that very first. I wish that we could walk into a space and I knew everything was ready and all of the lights were up and everything was in place and ready to go for you. And unfortunately, it's not always the case. And you know, and
sometimes there are definitely times where I'm like, I wish I could just be meaner about this and just be like, I don't have your crap. Don't ask me again. But that's not being a good leader, you know?
It's not, no.
And that's part of it, is we all have these feelings of being overwhelmed. But, you know, it goes back to what we spoke about in the last episode about the skill of being able to regulate your emotions.
Yes.
And even if you're overwhelmed and you're worried the show isn't going to happen because all your microphones didn't show up or whatever crazy thing. You just need to remember, okay, I'm not going to lash out on the people that are here to help me.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, your actors are there to help you put on the shows. Like, I'm not going to lash out on them. They don't know.
Right.
They just are worried about their own things.
I catch myself a lot we don't really have any wood to knock on, but I always catch myself during tech week when I'm feeling the most stressed. I always say this, and I know you've said this to me and I've said it to you, but at the end of the day, the show's going to happen.
Yes.
And I have, first off, never been in a tech, well, we'll get there, 2020. I've never been in a process where we've gotten to a tech week and a show hasn't happened, but the show always does happen, and it's always a solid product that we put out and give to our audiences. And that's a testament to that hard work and that managing the stress and answering questions and resolving problems as best that we can.
Yeah, and it's a unique skill as well to not let those show problems rule your life.
Oh, yes. Yeah, because we've got so much more going on in our lives.
It is very hard, and especially with doing shows almost nonstop now. Yeah. You can't let them rule your life. So with Grease, before we moved in, I was working almost around the clock finishing painting stuff. Mm-hmm. And my mom she would bring me food. She would run out, grab fast food, bring it back just to keep people fed while we were working. At the time, my go-to order was a quarter pounder with cheese. Mm-hmm. There was a tower of quarter pounder with cheeseburgers in the fridge because I couldn't stop long enough to eat them. So it was just, we don't have the luxury of being able to let it consume our lives anymore. But it's definitely, it threatens to sometimes when you get really, really stressed. Yep. You're I know this is going to happen, but I don't know what it is going to look like when it happens.
Exactly.
I don't know if people are going to want their money back, but...
That does not happen very often.
No.
But...
Well, it did... There was one person with Grease that I'll talk about.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to get into the kind of the performances?
I think we should, yeah. So there's a couple things I do regret. That I love that I have this opportunity to talk about them because unless people ask me, I don't really have the opportunity to talk about it. And I'm normally running around moving costumes, usually. That's what I do a lot. One of the things is there's a racial slur in Grease in the original script.
Okay.
And I was very much in the mindset that you can't change the script. It's a moment in time. Mm-hmm. And I thought that people would take it as this is a moment in time, is a moment in history when people would use this word. Mm-hmm. What happened was very surprising, which is the characters said it, and then everyone would laugh. And I was like, why are they laughing? Mm-hmm. It's not a joke. No one told a joke. I don't understand. And that was definitely a moment for me where I was like, okay, what I was going for, which is the integrity of when it was written, did not land. So I've taken different approaches to that since then. For instance, we'll get there, but there are words that are said in American Idiot, the musical, that we now know to be offensive. And before the show, I even gave a speech. I said, we now know these words to be offensive, but this show is set in X year, and during that year, these words were widely used, and because of that, we're going to honor the material and take you back in time, basically. But it wasn't relevant to the plot to the point where I should have kept it. I should have just cut it. So that was one of my regrets and something I learned from that show is I was like, I should have just cut that. Another thing I did that I didn't like, there was when Sandy becomes Sexy Sandy, she has this moment in her bedroom where she's singing, and I thought it would be really funny, and it was, people laughed, but I thought it would be really funny for her to stuff her bra with tissues, showing that she's going to become, this other woman. And I even had a conversation with the actor about it where I was explaining why I was doing it, and looking back on it, I was like, that wasn't necessary. And yeah, it got a laugh, but at what cost? You know what I mean? It was just enforcing the message that we didn't really agree with, and we could have just gone with the other material. We didn't have to add that, and people would have gotten what they needed to get out of it. So that was another thing that I was like, I shouldn't have done that. But again, I was young, and like with every show, we make mistakes, and those were just two of the ones that, in particular, that if I did it again, I would definitely change. Yeah. Some other show highlights. At one point, the light board just took on a mind of its own, and
as they do.
Yeah, during summer nights, when we had a packed house, the rainbows just started shooting across the sky.
Well, that's magical.
Yeah. And I just remember talking to Jacob, and he's like, I didn't hear from him for like a whole minute, and then he goes, "Okay, I have control over the light board again." And I was like, "Oh,
that's what you're saying. You didn't have right."
What else could have happened? So that was crazy.
Yeah.
Another fun moment is when we were opening. It was opening night. My grandparents, as they do, they had flowers delivered to me, but they had them delivered to the theater.
Oh, wow.
And they were addressed to the director. And one of the art center employees came in and went to me and said, "Hey, where's the director? There's some flowers here for them." And I said, "Oh, that's me." Mm-hmm. And they were like, "Oh, okay." And I was like, yeah. But that was kind of a fun little like, experience. It's me. I did this one.
Yeah. What a nice moment to have, especially on your opening night, too, of just...
It was surreal. Honestly, I had to really think back to make these notes because there's a lot about it that's just a blur. Mm-hmm. It was just so crazy. Mm-hmm. Everything about it. I couldn't believe it was happening, that they were ready for it to happen. I was like, here we go. Buckle up. It's happening. Mm-hmm. And Grace Lightning on opening night, when they hit every trick. No one fell. They hit everything. And I remember looking at one of the cast members' moms. She was right next to me, and we were both just crying. And I was like, they did it. They did it. And that was just so surreal. It's like watching your baby grow up, you know? Mm-hmm. You're like watching them on stage, and you're rooting for them, and there's nothing you can do for them at that point. You're just like, you got it. Do your thing. And they did. So that was really, really cool. And then on I don't remember what performance you came to. Do you remember which one it was?
I want to say it was this. Did you do 4 shows of Grease? 3. Okay, it would have been Saturday night.
Okay.
I was not there the first night. I wasn't there for the matinee, so it would have been Saturday night.
So on the closing one, someone accidentally kicked a speaker backstage. Mm-hmm. It blew up our whole sound. Oh, we had to hold the show for like 5 minutes to get the sound back. So it was like a horrible feedback sound. And remember, we weren't using any microphones.
Yeah.
Speaker blew, horrible feedback sound. The art center employees came in and they were like, we had to restart. Like, we had to get this back. We're going to restart the show. Mm-hmm. So everyone just waited for it to start. And I was like freaking out. Dakota was freaking out. Mm-hmm. But we got back on track. We plugged back the speaker back, and it wasn't their fault. They didn't know it was there. Mm-hmm. And, it's a really tight space, and there's set pieces.
Gosh, yes.
So, yeah, but that was stressful and scary. And as I was watching the show back, because I do have footage from it that doesn't go anywhere. It's just for personal use, for memories. But as I was watching it back, I actually had 2 of the characters do the house speech in character, which is very high school of me.
Yeah.
So I was kind of chuckling. I was like, I got that from high school, 100%. And we also ended up utilizing the curtains a lot to fix those set changes. Okay. So we would, if there was a scene with 2 people or 1 people, they were in front of the curtain, we were closing that, we were doing the scene change, and then we would open it back up.
Sure.
What's really funny is when Sandy and Danny are in the car at the drive-in, like right before Danny's big Sandy solo song. Mm-hmm. Every time I would watch the scene change, I would laugh because they wouldn't get out of the car. They would sit in the car, and then stagehands and Jane were pushing the car all the way to center stage. And I was like, it's a blackout. You guys didn't have to sit in the car. You could have helped move the car or at least taken your bodies out of it so it was a little bit lighter.
Oh, my gosh.
It was just so funny, though. And the beauty school dropout hats.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to make these, I took like cheap dollar store like traffic cones.
Okay.
And gathered a bunch of toilet paper rolls, but like the empty ones. So like the whole cast, they would bring me bags of toilet paper rolls as they would run out of toilet paper.
Yeah.
And I would hot glue them onto this traffic cone to give the idea of hair curlers, and then I would spray paint them. It was a good idea. And these things, we've had props like this in every show. They were hanging on for dear life.
As they will.
Like, every time I do the number, someone's, like, we would lose a hair curler almost every time.
Yeah.
And I remember after closing, when we were leaving the venue, I had all the hats, the beauty school dropout hats, in the back of my car. And by the time I got home, there was not a single curler left on the hats. They were all dead. And I was like, you know what? But they made it.
They did.
That's kind of how I felt. I was like, I'm dead, but I made it. It was very symbolic in that way.
Yeah.
I remember we just didn't want to say goodbye to each other after the show. Like, they were all taking pictures under the marquee. We were kind of taking our time to get out of there, which I've learned my lesson. Time is money. You need to get out of there and you chit-chat somewhere else.
Yep.
You find a restaurant and chit-chat over there. But
Take
for
the
the
party
first
outside
show,
and get out. Yep. Mm-hmm.
like, we didn't know... Like, none of us were ever going to experience that again. I mean, we've done other shows that are super special, but the first one and just the vibe of that, nothing compares to it. It was totally different, and I'm very fortunate for where we are now and the fact that shows are a bit more comfortable to do. Yes. And I'm very grateful for that, but there's definitely this nostalgia feeling for that first one because it was just so crazy and there was no reason that it should have worked, but it worked anyway. And watching it back, I was like, this was actually pretty good. Like, there were some really good moments that I had forgotten about. You know, when we rehearsed hand jive, one of the things I did is I wanted everyone to have different choreography because it was supposed to be a dance competition. So I wanted every couple to have their own choreography. And we rehearsed it in my basement. And people, like the couples, they would go to different rooms in my basement to practice their own choreography. And seeing it on stage was just like this feeling of, that was really cool. And
it just came together.
It did. Yeah. So I'm very proud of how it turned out. I thought it was going to be hard to watch, to be honest, because it was the first one. The scene transitions, while they happened, weren't super smooth, and there were a lot of things I would have done different. But when I watched it back, I was like, no, this is pretty solid. And considering the fact that we started from nothing to this in one summer, that's amazing.
It is amazing. It is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember coming in to see the show, and, you know, I'd been seeing everything throughout the summer, and, like, I knew you were doing auditions. I was very familiar with the process. You were keeping me, like, slightly updated on what was going on. And I remember going to see the show and just being so, like, overwhelmed by, like, first off, I was seeing people that I hadn't seen in a really long time performing in a show for a really long time. It had been, by that point, 2 years since I graduated high school, and it was just really exciting to see everybody just back on stage again. But to see, like, all of the work that went into that, and knowing just from, you know, I hadn't really been doing much theater up to that point, so, like, remembering what it took to put on a show and to see everything come together and the lengths that you all had to go through or to go to in order to reach that end product was so impressive. I just remember having a really, really great time enjoying the show. And I was like, okay, so great. Where do we go from here? And just like, I was really impressed. And I was like, I know that this, I could tell based off of watching the show that this was not going to be the end of that process.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. Well, I remember you talking to me after the show, and I don't remember exactly what you said, but you, like, I wasn't ready to switch gears from Grease yet, but you were kind of like, count me in, sign me up, what are we doing next? Yes. Let's talk. And honestly, like, I took that as really high praise, and like, oh, I might get emotional here for a second, maybe. I don't know. The feels are coming out a little bit. But I had a lot of people in that show who went to high school with me, and, like, our drama teacher didn't come, which sent a really big message of, like, she didn't support this. But for you, like, to come and then after you saw the show to basically say, hey, I want a part of this, that was the biggest compliment you could have given me. Seriously, because I was like, he didn't have to say anything to me. He could have just said, hey, good job. But the fact that you saw it and then wanted to be in it, be a part of it, I was like, I did do something here. And I do have friends here. And I'm not alone in this. And I mean, since then, we've gone on so many journeys together. But that was just, it was just the start of this whole separate thing. And, like, you think about it and you're like, I don't know how much we would have talked to each other outside of high school if we hadn't done this together. And I'm really glad we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you saying that, I mean, we'll go more into it, but, like, seeing the show and being in the position at that time, there was a lot going on for me at home at that time. And it felt so familiar to be able to see everybody doing theater together and, like, happy and just putting on a show. And I hadn't had that experience in a really, really long time. So seeing that and seeing everyone enjoying it, I was like, I have to, like you said, I felt like I needed to be a part of it, and I needed to have that feeling again. And fortunately, you know, the circumstances allowed me to be able to be a part of the company moving forward from that point.
Yeah.
But there was a lot going on, and having that moment and seeing that show was just kind of hit at the really, really important time. So
I think it also showed that it was possible to do stuff like this outside of the context of high school.
Yes, 100%.
A lot of people, I mean, we talked about this before, but a lot of people don't have that. They don't realize that it's an option. And I definitely had that moment of, like, I don't want to stop doing theater.
Right.
So how do I make this happen? But yeah, it was a really crazy experience that led to everything.
Sure. Absolutely.
So I'm very, very grateful for it, and grateful for all the people that were involved in it. And it was a time, and, like, we have way more crazy stories to share from that. I mean, that was only the beginning, but yeah, it was very special, and I look back on it very fondly. It definitely, like I said, tested a lot of people. I don't know, my parents were probably just like, we need to get this crazy lady out of here. She's taking over our house. But no, they were very supportive, and I had a lot of people surrounding me who supported me and helped make this happen, because it was just the unthinkable. Like, everyone was like, it's so much money, so much time.
Yes.
You don't have the experience, you don't have the resources, and, you know, like I said in the other episodes, people told me no plenty of times. But I still did it anyway.
Exactly. And that's been your motto for the last 10 years.
It has been. I mean, there's, you know, when people try now, it's like, it's almost cute. It's almost cute at this point, because it's like, you know, you're not the first. You won't be the last. Like, I kind of live by my own rules. I kind of like to do what I want. You can ask my parents, like, I've always been that way. I do what I want. And I make my own rules up as I go along. Yeah. And I really don't like it when people tell me I can't do something. That makes me want to do it really bad. So if you don't want me to do something, don't tell me I can't do it, because I'll end up doing it.
Exactly.
It's the secret.
We say this all the time, but you have dealt with bigger, badder, and worse. And people keep trying to test that theory. They really do. And it, you know, you just keep meeting them where they try and stop you, and just push on past.
People still, there are still people out there that think I'm a trust fund baby who just, like, walked into this, and I'm like,
you aren't?
No, I wish, but I'm like, guys, no, I actually, like, what do they call it? Grassroots, pulled up bootstraps, whatever. Yeah. Pulled up my bootstraps.
Whatever
I don't know what the saying
you want to
is.
Use, yeah.
I cleaned Taco Bell toilets for this. Like, I just don't try it. Just don't try me, because I love to prove a point.
And you will.
And I will.
And
I
you
always
will.
do.
Yep.
Even if it takes me a long time, I will get there and I'll do
Like,
it.
it will happen. It will happen.
But Grease is still the word.
Grease is still the word.
We'll revisit it soon.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll direct it. Maybe I can be like the old principal in it.
I like that for you. I like that journey for you.
Can I be the hand drive?
The hand drive. Yeah, I'll be Grease Lightning, and
Okay, you'll be the car.
I'll be the car. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Done. I like it.
We can just put like some red streamers on you when you're the fancy car.
Yes, I'm a big fan. I
You
like the vision.
comfortable with someone standing on top of you?
I didn't think through that far, unfortunately.
We'll just do a stuffed toy or like a baby doll, and we'll have a baby doll stand on top of you.
Okay. Yeah. Could do that, or it could be the summer nights.
Oh,
Yeah.
With the rainbows or without the rainbows?
Who knows? A little bit of everything.
Well, I feel like that was foreshadowing to our rainbows and heathers, which
Spoiler alert!
I know
It's coming up over the horizon.
But those were intentional rainbows.
Yes. Yes. All right.
Well, thanks for chatting about Grease with me.
Absolutely. Love being snarky, so
yeah,
we'll just keep it going.
And we'll just move right on to Heather's, which was our first endeavor together.
It was. Oh gosh, do we have the stories to tell?
Oh man, there's so much tea.
Yes.
And rehearsal conditions were... The people we work with today wouldn't survive in those rehearsal conditions.
I don't know. I love a good barn.
Oh, who doesn't?
Yeah. So, well,
all right.
We'll keep snarking until next time.
All right. See ya, Snarkies.
See ya.
Bye-bye. And that's a wrap. Thanks for getting snarky with us. We'll see you later.
See you next time.